Welcome to Conflict Wise. Conflict is often seen as a problem that's best avoided or resolved. But what if conflict is really a hidden opportunity?
A hidden opportunity for change that is lost if we rush to release the tension it brings. Not only the tension between us, but also the tension within.
Yes, in Conflict Wise, we tackle typical situations and share practical ways to use conflict for change.
Unless you apologize, that's it. Maybe that's something you've said, or maybe you've heard some other people say it. When we get hurt, it's the easiest thing ever to put out an ultimatum.
Really is, Evan, because when you do something to me that I experience as hurt, I'm expecting an acknowledgement from you, right? That you've hurt me in some way, and so it's almost the give and take of any relationship. It could be your closest relationships. It could be a transaction and a work relationship. But that same underlying thing is if you've done something that has in some way impacted me negatively or hurt me, I'm expecting you to acknowledge that.
Yeah, like for sure. Like I'm thinking about, there you are sitting at home waiting for your partner to come home because you have to get to a meeting, and he doesn't show up. And so, it's like, oh my goodness, now what? And why do I want an apology? I want an apology because I want to know that he's thinking about how this is affecting me, that he isn't showing up. And I want to know, does he actually care if this is impacting me this way, or does he not care? And I'm telling you, I'm done with it. I want to know that he's not going to be doing this again.
And so what's interesting about it is that you can be thinking that, right? You can be thinking, I need an apology, I don't want to know. But what's so interesting is whether you actually act on that, whether you step into, because you actually, to say why you're late and you know the implication, means you're actually going to step into conflict. And so there's a critical choice point here in any kind of transaction like this where do I actually pick up on it or not? But here's the key point, because Vi's saying, if I feel hurt, I can either let it slide by or I can actually deal with it. And so there's a critical choice in whether we choose to apologize, to request apology or not.
And what I like about it is if you make a deal about that right then and there, then at least you have reason to hope in the future, because you think that your relationship is going to be different. So I think Absolutely. That's why I don't want an apology. I want to make sure that my future is going to be different than my present and my past.
And it's a key point you make, because every conflict actually is about tomorrow. It's about not just what happened up to this moment, but it's about where we're going to from here. So, for example, let's take the scenario that Vi just mentioned around your partner coming home late and knowing that you need to be doing something as well. That could be a pattern. So there could be a pattern of behavior that's occurred over a period of time. So your response is actually not just to the one incident, but to a series of incidents that adds up to something that's important to you. So apologize or that's it is an important piece, because too often what I experience in my work is that people don't actually request or demand or ask for the apology. They let it slide, saying, well, okay. And there is something in that. I'm sure, to give the benefit of the doubt, is part of a relationship. But there's a balance here.
Yeah, because it's also so easily to avoid. It's so easy to just avoid that difficult conversation.
Absolutely.
And so that's why you let it slide. Okay, but here's a different scenario. So let's say your daughter says, you are so selfish. You only think about yourself. You don't even think about what we want. And you go into defense mode and you think, you ungrateful whatsoever. You don't even see what I do for you and the kids. And if it wasn't for me, and then you can just feel all the tension in the room increase. The conflict is escalating, and your daughter goes to the door, storms to the door, runs down the stairs, turns around and says a couple more words, and all you do is you look back and you go, you disrespectful. If you don't apologize, that's it. Okay, so now what's going on in this scenario? That's a different scenario.
Very different, right? Because what's happened is that you've shifted from being able to hear your daughter to, in fact, just hearing yourself in it, right? And asking for what you want. So at the point where that's happened, you no longer have heard what her concern is, right? So, because she's raised a frustration and actually labeled it in terms of you being selfish or you're self-centered in that situation. So your response has actually closed it down in a way.
Yeah. So coming up with the ultimatum and saying apologize or that's it really functions as a defense against looking at yourself, because looking at yourself is way too hard.
Yeah, and that's so often true of conflict, right? Where the fact that I feel hurt by something or by somebody in a situation, something's triggered for me in that interaction, right? So it's natural to actually go there to want to defend, and the fact the defense here is actually to push back onto the other person to say you apologize, and so what's the consequence there, right?
Well, a broken relationship, and it's an illegitimate request in that sense, because really what you need to do is look at yourself and what your part is in it. What's really tempting here, I think, is that people get caught up in the delivery. And so you can say, well, my daughter, she raised her voice, she stormed out, she didn't say anything after that, she didn't call me. And so you focus on all of that, and it's subtle because there are things that you can blame her for. But what it does is it takes away your opportunity to see what your role in it is, and the two of you could have a better relationship if you were able to hear what her issue was and look past the delivery to the message that she's actually trying to give you.
Well, it reminds me of one of our workshops on the value of hurtful feedback, right? Or feedback you don't want to hear, and it's so true. There's real value in it. But I, for the reasons you're saying, I actually don't even get there. So I've closed down the opportunity. I've closed down the possibility of getting feedback for me. I've also closed down the possibility of understanding or hearing the other person. In this case, your daughter. So that's important. So what do we do? What do we do about it? Now, what about the situation?
Well, I think again, it's an opportunity to have some ruthless self-reflection and think, what is my role? And ask for more information. That's counterintuitive. That's not a natural step. But then it's like, okay, so what's happening for you and what's happening for the other? And then there can be restoration of a relationship.
Yeah, and so Vi, as you're talking there, it's not like I can step away and negate what's happened for me, the fact that you felt hurt in the situation. I've almost got to acknowledge that, say, okay, I just got hurt here, but to move as quickly as I can. So to acknowledge I'm hurt, but instead of just a straight pushback, which is the knee-jerk reaction to push back, to acknowledge I'm hurt, and then to go back more with an inquiry, more be curious about what happened, what's going on for my daughter. But if I don't acknowledge that, I've just been hurt, that little simple step, it's like, stop, acknowledge that. It's more difficult for me to actually be open to keep that curiosity in my mind, because I'm operating with that fight-flight part of me.
And you know what? Sometimes I think we forget one simple word, because our acknowledgement could come in just the word ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. When she says you're selfish and you only think about you, ouch, right? So you have acknowledged it, and then you can move on to something else.
One of the things I learned from you over the years, Vi, that we've worked together, is that that ouch piece, if I can just stay with that ouch for a moment, there is most likely, almost in most cases, probably 90% of cases, there's an element of truth in the feedback that I find really, really hard. And by going to the ouch gives me the possibility of actually saying, okay, maybe that's, and even if I can't do it in that moment, to come back to that. So if the conversation went really well with one's daughter in that situation, you could end up having a great conversation about about the impact between you. But you also could, and you could also get feedback that maybe there's a part of me that is a bit selfish here.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so
Should we go, yeah, should we go to another scenario here? I'm thinking of a work context where something's happened between, it's you and your supervisor. And so your supervisor has done something. It might have been a piece of behavior in the moment that you didn't experience as respectful. You felt it was hurtful. And it was not okay. Now, we're not going to the extent of abusive type behavior. No, this is just interaction in a workplace where you felt, oh man, that person didn't get me, didn't understand me in this situation. And what happens in that, there's a power piece here, right? There's a power because you are accountable to your supervisor. He or she has authority over you. And so the idea of approaching them about the impact on you, you've got some questions about.
yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because inside you feel like saying, apologize or that's it. But, but you can't because of the power differential. And you also need your job because you have to pay for your mortgage. So what do you do? And human nature is such that if we feel like somebody has overlooked us, undermined us, taken credit for, in some way wronged us, then we want to get back. So how do you get back? And the most natural response is to get back with passive aggressive behavior. So maybe whatever their priority, your supervisor's priority is, you're going to push that to the side of your desk, not get it done. Maybe you'll come into work late. So the cost is high because both of you lose.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And when you both lose them, you lose in this way because your supervisor actually doesn't know the impact of his behavior on you. Yeah. And secondly, you in fact are more frustrated because you haven't really had a chance to share that impact and perhaps change or influence the situation. So you actually are doing behavior that makes you feel okay at one level, because at least I'm not giving up my power. You know, yeah. I'm doing it within my power. But ultimately, it actually does undermine you and your supervisor.
Yeah. So then what do you do? Hey, what are your options? And I know this would be a tough thing to do, right? And it takes a lot of courage, but it would be maybe to request having a meeting with your supervisor where in a clear and respectful kind of a way, you just talk about what the impact was. So the other person, so your supervisor knows what it was. And then maybe that's your best chance of having a different situation in the future.
Absolutely, you know, and I think part of the reason why we don't have those conversations and why you said it around that power piece, but if I don't do it, then the power piece becomes bigger in my head, right? It's almost like my supervisor becomes bigger, I become smaller. And you can do it in a very respectful way to say, hey, can we have a moment? I just want to talk about that. You know, don't have to make it a huge issue. Keep it in perspective, keep it linked to behavior that your supervisor did for you and the impact on you. So here's the behavior, here's the impact on me. By talking that through, now your supervisor, if that behavior were to be repeated, now you can have a different conversation. So, hey, now I'm going to, because if that did happen, now you could go back to and say, okay, so do you mind if we go back to that? Because now I feel, and so you would be going a step further. But by doing that, you actually have the chance of changing your own situation, because to be in a relationship where you feel totally disempowered, it also doesn't work in any scenario. So you would gain some of your own self-respect back, but also your supervisor would have more respect for you because you're doing it in a way, but also giving him feedback on his impact on you.
Okay, so we're going to end with this. You know, what's the good news? When we talk about apologize or that's it, what's the good news? You know what? Apologies give you an opportunity for reckoning. You can reckon with each other and have an opportunity to build relationship. And you also do a reckoning with yourself. Like, what about me? And how am I contributing to this situation?
Fantastic. So they're an opportunity. I'm John Radford. Together with Viola Neufeld, we'd like to just thank you for being part of our quest to really help people use their conflict for constructive change. If you found this video useful, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to our ConflictWise channel and share your opinion in the comment section and tell us what you think about Unless You Apologize, That's It.